Welcome. Thanks very much for joining me. So let's go to the beginning and watch what they're doing now. Because what's happening is that in the old days, we used to be able to tell what the Fed was doing by watching things like the Fed funds rate and watching the free reserves in the banking system. Every year or two, they change the rules and they change how to do things, always with the goal of obscuring what they're doing so regular people can't understand it. And now it's turning into where the Fed is just a device to take money from you and give it to the banking system. In other words, steal money from the government, steal money from our country, and give it to the banks. The banks don't work for the country, the banks work for the banks. But here is the notes on the Fed's big lie. See, the Department of the Treasury doubled the predicted shortfall. They doubled how much money they were going to spend that they didn't have. So in the fourth quarter alone, they took their borrowing estimate from $400 billion to $550 billion. That's in a 3-month span. They adjusted their expectations. So you see how much money that is. So is this how you reduce inflation? Annualized, if you keep this up, you've doubled from $1.3 trillion of deficit for the year. And deficit is a word that puts people to sleep. It hypnotizes them. It means spending money you don't have. It means borrowing money. The country borrows the money to spend it, and then you and I pay it back. We are the country. So if you keep this up, this extra money they want to spend, they've doubled from 1.3 trillion for the year to 2.6 trillion dollars of deficit for the year. Think, because the word deficit hypnotizes people. It just means spending more than you make. Now, the government doesn't make any money, but it collects money in taxes, but they want to spend now much, much more money than they collect in taxes. Now, if you don't inject money, if the Fed doesn't inject money into the system by quantitative easing, by QE, that means the dollar goes up and everything else goes down in value. The dollar goes up in value. That means everything you own goes down in value because you measure it in dollars. The dollar's crowded out by the government. It's taking money that you want to borrow for your business or your Christmas shopping or you want to buy a car, and a shortage of dollars means it makes the dollar. What happens? There's a shortage of dollars, the dollar goes up, and everything you own is worth less money, right? Your stocks are worth less money. Your house is worth less money. So here's the formula for the Fed. Anytime the deficit has been bigger compared to global GDP growth, think of global growth of GDP for the whole world, not just the country, every time that's happened, the Fed has stepped in and financed the spending with QE. Every time America wants to spend way more money than the world has surplus, the Fed has financed it with quantitative easing. That means printing money, putting money into the banking system. Now, this they've done every single time over the past 25 years. That's since 1997, in other words. The only time the Fed didn't do this in the last 25 years was last year, 2022. And you see what happened. The dollar went up, made trouble for everybody. There were pension problems in England, remember? And everything else. Your stocks, your house value, down. The money that they're saving for the fireman's pension fund, that's worth less. The money at the Harvard Endowment Fund is worth less. Everything, your house, your stocks, everything calculated in dollars is down because they made the dollar scarce by borrowing too many of them, and the dollar became worth more. The dollar went up in value because there's not enough of them. So right now, based on what they're projecting, the Treasury, the shortfall this time is going to be 68% of all global GDP growth. That means all the extra money that's produced anywhere in the world, the extra money they want to spend this year, our Treasury plans to spend, is 2/3 of all the extra money that anybody produces anywhere in the world. Now think about that. Is that a nerve or what? Right? That would be like your kids going to the mall and spending your next month's salary at the mall and coming home with your credit card and telling you they did it. Now, the only way to finance this is going to be to sell other assets, right? Or sell treasuries. The government has to finance all this extra money they want to spend. So what are they going to do? They're going to sell other assets or they're going to sell treasuries. Now, they say you can always sell treasuries. Somebody will always buy treasuries. But the question is, how much can you get for them? How much are they going to give you for them? Because if they pay you less for the treasury, that means you're paying more interest, right? The government borrows the money, pays the interest, and then it pays back the debt at the end. So it means if they give you less for the treasuries, that's another way of saying you're paying more interest to borrow their money. So treasury prices go down and interest rates that the government pays go up. So an interest rates that the government pays go up, and then the dollar goes up, and you and I get poorer. So all this happens if the Fed doesn't step in and buy the bonds. The Fed financing the shortfall that the government is planning to do with money that they create. Think about that. Up until October, you saw all this. Treasuries were down in price. They were up in interest rate. So the interest rates on the treasuries went up, your mortgage rates went up, your housing business went down, stocks went down, the dollar went up all over the world, had trouble in England because they couldn't afford the dollars. Your wealth going down means really your wealth stays the same, but it gets smaller in dollars. The stocks you own, they're worth the same, but you count them in dollars, so they're cheaper. So then, all of a sudden in October, you saw all this reverse. You saw the dollar down, treasuries up, interest rates down, stocks went up since October. Fed running operating losses and paying the banks. Now, this is the part that's hard to picture. And they keep it that way because they don't want you to understand what they're doing. The part that's hard to picture is this. A bunch of bankers, the Fed, creating money, printing money, and paying it to their friends at the bank. That's how they create surplus money. The Fed is paying money to the banks. And they call that running an operating loss. But of course, the Fed running an operating loss means who's paying it? You, me. They're printing money and they're paying it to the banks, their buddies at the banks. Reducing the stress in the economy by adding liquidity to the banking system. See, all these words that they use obscure what they're doing. So nobody understands what they're doing. So the deficit is now so big that if business is down, that's going to mean even less tax receipts, right? If they make everything go down and your business is lousy, they collect more money. They collect less money in taxes. But the government still wants to spend more money, even though they're making the economy go slower and collecting less taxes. They're making a huge shortfall. And the world doesn't produce the people who buy our bonds, the world doesn't produce enough extra money to finance all this spending that the Treasury wants to do, the government. So how do they finance it? Buying treasuries. But the world doesn't have enough, and many of them don't even want to buy treasuries anymore. Why would they when the treasuries are going down in value, going down in price? The government says, again, we can always sell treasuries. Somebody's going to buy them. But the question is, At what price will they buy them? How cheap can you afford to sell them? Because the cheaper it is, the more interest you're paying. Remember, selling cheaper means paying higher interest. How much interest can our government afford to pay to spend money it doesn't have and doesn't collect? So for the moment, let's look at this. I'm going to call it tactical. Look at this in the short term for the moment. So it's true, inflation came down. Used cars got cheaper. Houses got cheaper. The economy went slower. Your stocks went down. You're poorer. And that's all happening for the moment. They told you that's going to be good for you. Making you poor is going to be good for you because we're going to erase inflation. So call that tactical. Now, what does secular mean? Secular means the big picture. So look at it on the other hand. Tactical is they made you poorer and you should like it. It should be good for you. It's great for you that they made you poorer because it reduced inflation. You're poorer, you have less money, they're happy, and you're supposed to be happy. Now, secular, let's look at the big picture on the other hand. Think about how much they want to spend now. They, the government. $900 billion on defense coming up, they say. $3 trillion in transfer payments or welfare, right? 3 trillion. $1.5 trillion in regular treasury spending. So this comes out to $4.5 trillion just for these big three expenditures. That's not running the government, but that equals the whole tax collection. So where are they going to get the money to run the country? What if they have a war? What if they have to send weapons to Ukraine? What if they have to build roads? What if somebody attacks us? What if the police need a raise? So what are they doing? They're crowding the world out by borrowing all the extra money in the world. Everybody in the world is penniless. And remember, in the last year, what they called when your stocks were going up, houses were going up, they called that the everything bubble. But remember, when everything went up, your business did great. Your house was worth more. Your stocks are worth more. They called that the everything bubble, but that means a bubble in tax receipts also. Inflation made money to finance the government. They collected $1 trillion in April 22. $1 trillion. Now that's not withholding and all that. That's just investment gains. That's the money they collected in April of 2022. Remember, everybody's having their salary withheld all the time. That's not what they collected in April of 2022. That's just people who took profits on stocks. That's just people who paid money. Investment gains, business gains. That's everything bubble profits. But now they want to kill that, right? They want to make everything go down. You want you to be poorer. If they're not going to have that, what are they going to do instead to spend all that money? Well, they either finance it by printing money, in which case the interest rates come down and stocks go up and everybody's happy, right? They print money, interest rates come down and everybody's happy, or they don't. And then we find out how much is the world willing to pay to lend our government money via treasuries. How much is everybody in the world willing to pay to lend our government money via treasuries? At what price can our government afford to sell treasuries and then pay interest to the rest of the world? So they want to spend trillions of dollars to distribute money, pay welfare, buy votes, and you subsidize this. You subsidize this with printed money. The Congress people, Ocasio-Cortez, Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, she's saying, you pay for this, you subsidize the money we want to spend, you, the Fed, you buy these bonds so that we don't have to worry about selling them to Russia and China. We don't have to pay a lot of interest. You, the Fed, print the money, buy our bonds, subsidize, or guess what? We, the senators, you're not independent. If you don't buy those bonds and subsidize this year coming into the election, guess what? We'll find somebody who will, because we want to win the election next year, right? In 2024, we're going to have an election, and we want everybody to be feeling great. We remember what happened back in, 1992, when Bill Clinton was elected, because at that time, the Fed was raising rates. There was the economy slowed down, and basically everybody got kicked out of office. George Bush lost the election. The Congress people got kicked out. The senators got kicked out. Bill Clinton came in, and he started a whole new regime where we don't spend so much money that we don't have, right? That was in 1992. Ever since that time, the central bank has made sure that the economy is doing great coming into the presidential election year, year 4. Now, we're just finished year 2, going into year 3. By the end of year 3, the central bank is going to absolutely make sure that people feel fabulous, so that in 2024, they all want to vote for the incumbents who want to be reelected, right? Everybody who wants to buy votes. Washington's full of them. So it's not just those extremes like Elizabeth Warren and Ocasio-Cortez. It's now everybody in Washington. So tell me, when is the Fed going to blink? They say they're tightening, but I just showed you they weren't tightening in October, remember? They were tightening in August and in September, but all of a sudden, what happened? The interest rates started coming down, the treasury prices went up, the dollar got weaker, your stocks went up. What happened in October? Well, the Fed blinked. The Fed printed new treasury. The Fed bought those treasuries. Interest rates came down, everything came up. They didn't tell you they were doing that. They made believe they're tightening. They talked about tightening, they jawboned, they raised the federal funds rate, but they also bought all those bonds. They did quantitative easing. So I don't know which day it's going to be. I don't know which day the Fed is going to blink and start buying. They may keep raising the federal funds rate. That's not the point. They're going to buy those extra bonds that the government issues in order to finance all that spending they want to do, because the world doesn't want to buy those bonds anymore. I don't know what day the Fed's going to do that. I just know that I promise you it's going to be long before spring of the election year 2024. Long before. So thank you all very much. I'll see you next time.